So what is podcasting? Podcasting is a relatively new technology, and it enables users to quickly and easily download multimedia files of all sorts. That would include not just audio, but also video or still images. So there's different kinds of podcasts aimed at playback not only on mobile devices like iPods and MP3 players, but cell phones, computers, and things like that too. A good thing to do when you're trying to get a grip on any kind of new technology is kind of compare it to some of the other things that are out there and things you might be already familiar with. If we compare a podcast to a webcast, both can live on the web. Both are also compressed audio. In other words, we chop them down and make them a little bit smaller than they would be if they're full bandwidth CD quality sound. Both can be streamed, but here's where we start getting into some of the differences. Podcasts also can be downloaded, and you can use random access moving through them. Webcasts also require a web connection. In other words, you got to be connected to the World Wide Web. Podcasts don't. Not only can you get them directly in a browser like iTunes or Windows Media Player or something like that, you can subscribe to them like with an RSS feed, just like you would a blog, and they can be emailed to you. They can also be distributed on fixed media like CDs and DVDs. Don't think about podcasts as just this tiny thing that comes off the web. The difference being that it can be downloaded and moved through at random access, and there are many more ways of distributing them. Relative to blogs, blogs generally carry text. Sometimes there's audio blogs and video blogs, which are very similar to podcasts. Both personal media, in other words, they're media that individuals can work on and put out there on their own. They're informal. At the same time, many podcasts are professionally produced. In other words, they're repackaged content from radio shows or something like that. Your favorite NPR show or favorite sports talk show even. Nowadays, you can download them as podcasts and listen to them. Also, blogs tend to be a one-way linear medium. In other words, the guy writes it or sends a podcast up there, he plays it. You can maybe put content on it, but you don't really interact with it. Podcasts, on the other hand, can have chapter marks, things like that. So if I'm listening to my podcast, I can pause my iPod or my computer the next time I come back to it. It can be marked in such a way that I know where I was. They can have placeholders in them. That's a function of the application you play them back in, as well as the file format that you store it in. Beyond that, podcasts have some slightly different legal limitations and fair use restrictions. Something that's educational gets a buy sometimes on things. Podcasts almost never do. And the reason is that ultimately, and the aggregators are very easily searched. They have devices that can go through and scan things, and they can just subscribe to everyone's podcast, look for them, find copyrighted material, and bill you for it. Podcasting versus broadcasting. Both podcasts and broadcasts can be streamed or wrapped, so we can download them. Both require some sense of programming, and also they rely on a similar set of aesthetic conventions. In other words, things that wouldn't work very well on a radio show probably won't work very well on a podcast. Again, this goes back to one of the things that might be different from blogs. An audio blog, you're going to be totally okay with breath sounds and the noise of the computer's fan and stuff like that in. Podcasts may be a little bit less so than you would. Again, wider audience, more distribution for it. So that kind of makes a difference with that. Podcasts speak to a self-selecting, pre-qualified audience, while broadcasts pretty much speak to anyone who turns on the TV or radio, whether they're qualified or not, whether they're interested or not. So you can reach a lot of people by broadcast media, but they may not be the people that you want to reach. It's really kind of a good thing to blow up some of the big myths about podcasting. And the biggest myth of all is that it requires an iPod. The fact is, the vast majority of people who listen to podcasts don't even own an iPod, and they listen to them on their personal computers. So the name podcast isn't a misnomer. Apple did maybe the best job of creating this medium and expanding it and making it accessible, making it a cultural phenomenon. But by now, they're not the only game in town. There are many aggregators out there other than Apple. And of course, there's the typical format wars with podcasts that you had with video and things like that. You know, Windows Media Format, MP4, MP3. You've got all of these variables that you have with that. Don't worry so much about it requiring an iPod. Now, we do want to kind of address that audience, but it's not the only audience out there, or even the largest one. The notion that no one listens to podcasts was certainly true at one time. Today, it's no longer true. Actually, 10% of people in this country over 12 years old have listened to a podcast. Something just under that, 7 or 8%, have listened to podcasts within the last 30 days. If you take 7% of just under 300 million people, that's a lot of ears. Communications and public relations is probably the area that I think is really going to be changed by podcasts. If you're in any kind of business where you need to deliver a message that's more complex than a one-liner or a typical advertising campaign to, again, a pre-selected, engaged audience, podcasts are a great vehicle for that. They're also great for reinforcing brands or just maintaining presence. Maybe you don't have anything new going on. So yeah, brand reinforcement and presence, just being there is sometimes important. Everyone talks about viral marketing these days, and nobody really knows what it is. And the truth of the matter is viral marketing is really about customer-driven communities and customer-driven content. Podcasts are really good at that. A lot of times there are a lot of podcasts out there. There might be something out there already pertaining to or related to whatever topic you're interested in. So building a community of customers around a podcast is a good way to keep yourself in front of the people that matter most. Secondarily, again, customer-driven podcasts a lot of times breed customer evangelists, people that are going to go out there and say, man, I love this. I love Honda cars, so, I'm inadvertently a lot of time a Honda evangelist. I like Apple computers, so a lot of times I talk about them. They're also a great way to establish your expertise in a particular area. This is a great creative outlet for creative people, and anyone who has creative people around them wants to keep them busy and engaged in doing things that actually have some kind of return on investment for their time. Podcasting is a great way to do that. Beyond that, having a set of podcasts out there, we're going to look at a couple podcasts that have been sponsored. One of the nice things about it is that you keep this content out there. It's pervasive. It doesn't go away. I might choose to put out an article on this particular DVD, but you might not buy that DVD or be interested in it until 5 years from now. But with webcasts, podcasts, stuff like that, that content is going to be alive out there indefinitely for as long as you choose to archive it, which means that whenever someone Googles that, they're going to be there. Also, by creating new podcasts, you're driving your Google rank up, your page ranks up, which is important today. You really don't want to let that stuff down too much. The pervasiveness of your message, the pervasiveness of your organization on the web is important on a number of levels. You're talking about your Google ranking, obviously. That's the one we're most familiar with. But archiving old podcasts, keeping information available. One of the first rules of the information age is that we don't know, and in many cases we can't know, the value of information at the time we create it. Ultimately, all information has some value. We just don't know what it is. Fortunately, we can grab stuff, hold it. Storage is cheap today, so it's not a big deal. Graphic simplicity and bold branding on stuff tend to trump a lot of the clever copy and things like that with them because you're trying to grab them quickly, get them to act on impulse, and then tie to them personally. And finally, the depth of the material that you have, and this is where podcasting is especially strong, the depth of the material that you have is really what's going to drive it. Essentially, they like information, they seek it, they want to get reviews, they want to interact with your existing customers, past customers, potential customers in some useful way to them. Strangely enough, podcast consumption increases the time spent listening on radio. You can think about these as sort of hand-in-hand technologies. You can use radio to drive people to your podcasts or podcasts to connect with a campaign or something you've got on a radio. It can work in both directions with that kind of stuff. I think one of the reasons that this is the case, since a lot of these people do have iPods and things like that, they want to listen to them in the car. So at the end of the day, they want to have something they can plug in and listen to outside of their office or home or wherever they're at. making podcasts, there are a couple ways we can go about it. And as I said, there's probably, for a lot of clients that we have or products that we're already making, there's probably communities out there already that are working on these things or are interested in them. And there might even be a podcast already. So ultimately, if you just go and look around, you might find podcasts out there already that someone else is making that you can adopt and sponsor. Autoblog is one that Volvo picked up. MommyCast is one, and I'll play you some MommyCasts that got picked up by Dixie as a sponsor. So basically it's just two moms making a podcast, and Dixie just throws money at them now. So it's a good thing to do.
Hi everybody, it's Brooke Peterson. I have more New Year's resolutions than I care to count. With the help of technology, I'm pretty confident that I can make them all. Movie nights are a great way to spend more time with my family. Photo editing with a touch screen will allow me to cultivate my creativity, and interactive books help me feel like I'm really advancing my daughter's learning. Dell has amazing post-holiday deals on laptops, desktops, tablets, all featuring Windows 8. Click here on Dell.com to find great post-holiday deals on all your electronics. Mama, don't you know you keep the whole world turning round? Hey moms, it's Brooke Peterson here from MommyCast, and I have kind of started dressing in the same sloppy outfit every day. And my New Year's resolution is to step it up. I'm getting my chic coolness back. So I'm gonna show you 3 different looks today for my New Year's resolution that I think are pretty original, hopefully chic, and are all starting with jeans and a white tank. So look number 1, little boho. So what I thought is maybe we start to become a little chicer by layering things up. Caplets and boleros are everywhere right now. So last but not least, I am just gonna do a really simple earring. All right, so this is my chic New Year's resolution, step up the jeans and white t-shirt outfit number 1. And it all started with jeans and a white tank. Chic outfit number 2. Taking one of those sheer kind of summery blouses. It's so thin that when you layer it during the winter, it doesn't feel bulky. You kind of get this really fun layered look without all the bulkiness. Third outfit coming your way. Now, I don't generally do over the knee boots, but these have a really short heel on them, which, as every mom knows, you go anything over 2 inches, it's an insurance liability when you start trying to pick up kids and walk through the sand, and we just don't do that. We're a 2-inch rule around here. Then I took a bright blouse, and everywhere this season are these really cool kind of lacy / macrame tops. I love these short sleeve jackets. They let every layer show through. I'm Brooke Peterson. Thank you so much for watching MommyCast, and have a happy and chic New Year.
And on top of Dixie sponsoring their podcast, since then they've actually picked up some other sponsors and actually have ads as part of their podcast. So, these ladies know what they're doing. I have to give them credit as far as their marketing with the thing. And the sound quality, of course, has improved along with that over the past years. There's affordable internal opportunities for everyone. If you've got existing content, things like that, put it out there. I mean, if it's something that was made for the public, if there's promotional videos. I used to do industrial videos about 20 years ago. That content would have been perfect for this. We had this one tool company that we did some stuff for that had a separate video for, actually, they were almost like instruction manuals for people in other countries. Podcasts are great for that kind of thing. And of course, again, if you have the expertise, the will, and the need, you can always develop content in-house and produce everything from scratch with that. So I think what we want to do next is kind of move into our general part of the thing and start talking about when we'll start making things, and we'll get into that. First of all, this is the basic process of creating podcasts. Obviously, you need a topic. Process that we have is database-driven design and continuous creation. What those are have to do with some of the things that have changed and sort of make podcasting possible, some of the new tools and things. Then we're going to talk about capturing content, some basics on recording and adding sound effects and things on GarageBand, editing and mixing inside of GarageBand. In terms of what we need to do to figure out what the content is, we want to decide, is the podcast product or issue centric, or does it center around a person? Is this something that's a single program or a series of things? Is it a host-driven podcast, or is it guest or feature-driven? That might be one of the more important decisions you make. A lot of times you can do interviews. We've done podcasts for clients where ultimately we'll bring in somebody who's just a real character, president of the company or something like that, but maybe doesn't have a script, doesn't know what he's going to talk about, and we'll interview him. At the end of the day, the interviewer has to know not to step on the guy's lines, let him finish, keep him directed. So it's not an automatic thing. Not everybody is a great interviewer. But as far as interviewing as an approach, if you have a good interviewer, you can get a podcast that way and let the guest carry the podcast and cut down on a lot of the pre-production worries and things like that you have to worry about. Finally, we got to decide on this, whether we're going to make an audio-only podcast. Is it going to have slides in it, or is it going to be a video podcast? Slide podcasts work pretty good. Slides you can also add URLs to. They can click through them, and they'll go on even iPod shuffles. Even though you can't see the slide, you can hear the audio. So that's kind of a nice halfway point. One of the things is Apple had sort of pioneered the whole concept of podcasting. One of the things that made it seem like podcasts are connected to iPods is the fact that it's so easy to make them on their hardware and software. On the other hand, there are starting to appear some Windows solutions. If you're a Windows house, Alesis Podcast Kit, M-Audio is the company that makes Pro Tools. They have something called Podcast Factory. And jumping through a little bit of extra hoops, you can get to basically the same place. Database-driven creation is something that's sort of appeared, and as we sort of go through it, everyone knows Andy Warhol. He's maybe the first example of database-driven creation, and it started off with product cans, iconic news photographs, photo booth photographs, hand-colored, finally news photographs in multiple poses, and then action coming from that. Taking images and information from newspapers, stock photo databases, grocery store shelves, ultimately making stuff. This whole thing has sort of advanced a whole lot with computers. And in fact, given computers' ability to randomly access huge amounts of information, I mean, if you think about it, if you're familiar with video editing, just 15 years ago, before the widespread use of things like Avid and Final Cut and tools like that, we had a hard time just finding a particular thing. And I know, when I used to edit music videos, there would be some clip that I needed that was on a reel, and I would spend 20 minutes just identifying, setting up, and then performing an edit of maybe 2-second clip. And in music videos, you might have hundreds and hundreds of 2-second clips that you can't get to. The best example of this, where everyone's seen it today, is on shows like The Real World, reality television. Great example of database-driven creation. And what's going on with this is that they basically typecast people, find people to fit in these roles, and season after season after season, they breed drama that would challenge Shakespeare. I kid you not, it's great, because it's a classic Shakespeare story. Basically, you take 7 people, you put them in the swankiest, most laid out pad in the world, give them the easiest, most cake job that you possibly can, and you sit back and you watch them self-destruct. Human nature, right? And it happens season after season after season. And the way it happens is they basically populate a database with individuals and footage of these individuals doing it. Apple figured this out and started creating applications that sort of take care of that and link these things to keyword. And it's not an accident that places like Flickr, MySpace, where you have networks of friends and individuals that you connect to, Flickr works by tagging photographs with keywords and things like that. And what happens is individuals will see a picture and say, oh, that reminds me of this. And this might not be what the picture is, but it's this oblique reference. And now when I go to search on it, or when you go to search on it after I've named it this, you're going to find when you search for this one picture. Might be great, might be terrible, who knows. But this was first about collecting all your stuff and putting it in one place. iTunes did the same thing and gave us podcasting. Finally, they gave us GarageBand, which is a tool to make these things. iTunes gave us the music store, and not only does it sell music, it has this little section here if you click and you can go to podcasts. And these are just the ones they're featuring. In other words, these are highlighted podcasts. You notice right in the center of it, first thing you see, make your own. Anyone can submit to the iTunes store, so that's kind of a good thing. In fact, for musical artists, it's easier to get your podcasts on than it is to get your music in the music store.